Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. It's so good to be here with you today. I'm Colin Campbell. I lead the Sales Hacker team. We're talking about sales efficiency today. And we've got a pretty awesome panel here to help us do that. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I'm just going to go in order of my screen. So Heidi Darling, can I ask you to tell the Sales Hacker community who you are and what you do?
Woohoo! What's up, people? My name is Heidi Darling. I head up marketing at ROI.DNA. We are a B2B enterprise digital marketing agency specializing in ABM, ABX. And what that really means is we don't believe there should be a divide between sales and marketing. We believe that there should be absolute alignment and overlap, which, teaser alert, drives efficiency. Over to Owen.
Hey, everybody. My name is Owen Brewer. I work at a consultancy called Winning by Design. We work with recurring revenue businesses, mostly SaaS businesses, on issues across what we call the bow tie. So if you've seen the bow tie in the corner there before, this is how we talk about the full customer journey, and excited to be here with all of you today.
Thanks, Owen. Good. Thanks for being here, Heidi and Owen. Kate, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hey, everyone. Glad to be here. So I'm Kate. I'm Senior Director of Sales at Drift. I live in Boston and been with the company for going on 3 years now. I think a few interesting things about my team and my experience that will probably set the stage from where my perspective is coming from. All of the AEs in my business unit are full cycle, so we don't have any SDR support, so do all of our own prospecting, upsell, cross-sell, expansion. Tenure on my team varies from less than 6 months to 6 years plus. And I think as we've gone up market as a company and really grown up, we have gotten much more strategic in our sales process, but the nature of our business also allows us to be a little bit more transactional. So I think I say all those things to, hopefully bring a balanced and well-rounded perspective when it comes to improving sales efficiency and effectiveness. So thanks for having me.
Right on. Thanks for being here, Kate. And last but certainly not least, we've got Aaron Owens. Hey, Aaron. Thanks for being here.
Hey, guys. Yeah, thanks, Colin. So my name is Aaron. I lead revenue operations strategy at Intelligent Demand. We are a B2B revenue growth agency, a consultancy based in Denver, but we're remote, we're everywhere. And we primarily work with healthcare, telecom, technology, and professional service companies to create a true end-to-end customer experience that doesn't just attract new logos, but actually grows those logos into growing accounts. So really excited to be here, really excited to dive in.
Right on. Well, dive in we will, but we can't until our community helps us kick off here. So remember when I said I'd be asking for your involvement? This is that time, the first time. If you're watching, get in the chat, make sure your setting is set to everyone, and tell us sales efficiency. If you were asked to come up with a formula for sales efficiency, what would it be? How do you measure that? And I promise it's only partially a trick question. Drop your answers in the chat. Let us see what you're thinking. Wish we had Jeopardy music for times like this. Quota attainment. Okay, like percent quota attainment, Jeff. That's a pretty good measure. I like that. Thanks, Jeff. And Jeff, while we're waiting for others to answer, what's your role? We got Diego, closing deals as fast as possible. Okay, sales cycle, sure. Marcus says there are multiple metrics you'd have to consider. I don't disagree, Marcus. What are a couple of those metrics? Or is there maybe a most important one in your opinion?
Marcus, as a consultant, I always love the, well, it depends answer. So
that's always the best, yeah. Those are my favorite too. That's actually one of our guiding principles in moderating the Sales Hacker forums, which, by the way, if y'all don't know, there are forums on Sales Hacker. You can go have these kinds of conversations asynchronously on saleshacker.com anytime you want. And that's one of the ways we moderate. We're like, if this answer doesn't start with it depends, maybe it's not the best answer. SLA is being kept across the process, says Sheila, of prospecting. Okay. David could cheat. Conversion rate in every step of your funnel versus time spent, velocity and close rate. All right. Interesting stuff. This is why this conversation is going to be so interesting, because I think you're right. There are many ways to look at this. If you ask like SaaS founders or like the VC community, they'll tell you that there is a formula for sales efficiency. And we'll get into what that is. But the truth is, it's not an actionable formula all the way down to the altitude of like a rep or a frontline manager, or even like a director of sales. It's hard to use that metric to turn it into insights that would drive different actions, which is why we're talking about this today. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Kate, can you give us your thoughts? Like, how do you on your team, you said you manage a team of full cycle reps, varying degrees of tenure, 6 months to 6 years at Drift.
Yep.
How do you think about measuring and acting on sales efficiency in your role?
Yeah, so I think at my level, it really starts with developing a great operating rhythm and cadence with my ops team. So, I'm a leader who, of course, like being in sales, like I feel like I have great intuitions, I have great instincts, but I'm very much in the school of thought of like the devil is in the details, and you really got to get in the data and look at a lot of different things to assess the full funnel in the sales cycle, to pick up on things, when you compare rep to rep, what are those different levers that we can tweak to make that rep more efficient. Like with some reps, it's like, you know what, they didn't have a chance to hit their number because they simply just didn't have enough pipeline. With other reps, it's like, okay, if we can increase their close percentage by this amount, and the breakdown of that is like, maybe they need to get more multi-threaded, or maybe they're not talking to the right people, or something in their sales process. And another thing is, of course, like sales cycle. There's a multitude of things that I look at with the team. And then some reps just like, frankly, aren't spending their time in the right places, like on the right activities top of funnel, which is like really interesting. And there's so much data that we dive into to think about how to make that part of the process more efficient. And then sometimes when we have opportunities, they're actually not spending their time with like the right opportunities, and like they're wasting time there. So I really try to encourage and empower my managers that report into me and manage the reps directly to like bring them into these data conversations, to have it, really empower them to have those conversations. Cause like it becomes really clear when you can show the reps the data, and it's like, okay, look at you compared to this rep. And like, what are the differences in the funnels? And how can we, get you more efficient, winning more deals, making more money. So
I love that. And that is super interesting. I mean, you're already pointing out that even in your role managing reps, there are different altitudes of sales efficiency you think of. Like on the holistic level, it's like revenue per rep. Are these people all hitting their targets? And I forget, it might have been Marcus who said quota attainment would be an interesting metric to use for sales efficiency. But then you're saying the efficiency at the top, like in prospecting, efficiency in closing and following up. There are all these different altitudes you have to keep an eye on.
Yep.
Jeff, it was Jeff. Thanks, Marcus. What else? Anything that Owen, Aaron, or Heidi you want to add to that?
So I think that this relates really closely to what we refer to as the REX framework that we work with a lot of sales leaders around coaching programs on. It stands for results, effort, knowledge, and skills. So if the results are on point, generally, like you're not going to have as much lift by identifying which efforts are off. If the results are off, you can dig into the efforts. And for each role, there's going to be a bucket of efforts that I'm sure we could list off in a brainstorming fashion right now that would get us 90% of the way there. That are going to be the ones that are like the pitfalls for most of our reps. And so as long as you are set up with a dashboard where you can scan those different efforts for all of your reps, you're going to be able to pinpoint which ones they're coming up short on. And then in your weekly one-on-ones or whatever coaching cadence you have with your reps, you're able to focus the conversation around those specific deficiencies or opportunity areas that will help them improve their results in the end. What becomes interesting is when you have folks that are not hitting results, but they are doing all of the efforts, like they're making the same number of dials, connects, et cetera, as other folks, and who are being more successful. Well, then you have to dip into the knowledge and skills buckets, right? Saying, okay, so you're going through the motions, but something's not working here, right? There's something in the quality of your activities that's hurting your conversion rates. And that's where we start to get into, topics like doing call recording reviews to try and understand qualitatively how people are executing those specific like micro moments, those key moments in their process, to try and coach them around how they can improve execution on each one of those specific kind of touch points that could be impacting their overall performance.
That's
we
cool.
do that all the time, Owen, just to chime in there too. Like I did an exercise recently with my team where we were looking at some data in outreach actually. And it's like, what sequences are performing the best? Like what's the drop off? How long are the sequences? And there is a cohort of reps that we know, like they're the best at prospecting, the best at booking meetings. And we're like, are these sequences, it's chicken or the egg, right? Like, are the sequences performing better because they're better sequences, or it's because the rep is performing these sequences? So a lot of what we found is like the level of personalization and the effort that they put into those sequences and like those other, touch points or quality activities they're doing outside of a sequence, like calling and LinkedIn and kind of like being ingrained in their prospects organization, or the things that are like moving the needle, which those are some of my favorite things to coach on, because like the data tells you one part of the story, and then of course you got to like actually coach on it and get down to the tactical. And like that's what I always say, it's just like people first. Like you need to get into the weeds with everything. Like there's no ivory towers here. Like we are in the details, we're in the weeds, like we're co-selling with our team and just like trying to create that like awesome coaching and like selling environment together. So
100%. The one last thought on this item is like, you may not know what combination of activity and like qualitative factors are driving success. And so you can't be shy about listening to call recordings, jumping on calls, and trying to understand qualitatively what's happening, because that's how you're going to design the playbook that you end up onboarding new reps based off of, which is based off of what your reps have shown you drives success in your market, right? It's always going to be unique from other companies. So you can't cut and paste.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I also think it's, to the degree that you're successful is to the degree that you say no many times and your level of focus. And so I wonder, what are the intent signals? What are the ways in which you can focus efforts to really dedicate your time on the high value accounts and the high value touches, the high value activities?
Yeah, I love that, Heidi. Like you got to really, have your foundation and things that are, this is the standard, like this is what works, this is fundamental. And then I always tell the reps, like make one tweak, like try something new, something different, something creative. We have like a big culture around sharing learnings and like lots of transparency into what's working well. And we have a super collaborative sales team, like they're competitive, they want to win, but like they share and they're just like genuinely like nice and kind people. But I always push people, like try to tweak one thing. Like don't try to change up your whole entire motion. Like try to identify like what's that one thing that could, give you that incremental lift. Love that.
I really love this conversation about really tweaking and building out the function of sales and making it as effective as possible. Heidi, I like what you said about knowing what to say no to, and taking that even a step further. I would say, one of my passions is to take a step back and to look at the entire end-to-end process, the entire end-to-end experience, how all the different disciplines from marketing to sales and customer success tie together. And I think one of the things that we haven't talked about yet that makes reps more effective is making it a more lucrative at bat. You could have the best batter in Major League Baseball, but if he gets up to bat with a pool noodle, like he's only going to get it so far. Right? So making sure that the individuals and the accounts and the leads that are being put in front of your reps are really the right fit. Heidi, I like what you said about intent, that they are showing intent, that you are using the right motions, that you're talking to them at the right place in their buying cycle, that you're talking to them in the right way based off of what they're, where they are in their buying cycle. You can't talk to them about, the same way you would talk to them when you're trying to close them as you would, if they're top of funnel, et cetera. And Heidi, to your point, certainly want to have sales involved the entire way and have it working together, but it's a different conversation. So I love the conversation around Owen, what you said. I wrote it down. Your PECS framework. That's brilliant. I love it. And I think also thinking about just making sure you're having conversations with the right people, and you're having the right conversations with them, and then bringing that sales effectiveness into that.
On the topic of reps being effective in different situations, let's get really tactical here for a second. Danielle asked a great question, and I'm going to split it into two actually for you, Kate. So question one, how much do you, in your role, just real life, how much do you rely on AI call recording or peer-to-peer groups for your sellers to improve? And how much does that development fall on your shoulders? And I guess the second part of that question is that balance what you would recommend to others, or is there something that you feel like you're still working to improve on your own team?
Sure. So for the first part of the question, so we use Gong. Love that tool. It's great. I think there's the inherent value in just like being able to listen to a call, Monday morning quarterback. So my managers are, especially when the reps are new, like they're in the weeds, they're on so many calls. Like we do a ton of co-selling and team selling together. Especially when just to give them extra support, like teaching the reps new things. So we're there on calls. But one of my recommendations too for the managers is the reps get more tenured is step away from the calls. Like you don't need to be on every single call, like value your time. Again, like value your time and your efficiency a lot too. So you'll being able to review a call after it happens gives you a different perspective versus being in it. Like it's very interesting because like, the managers will, we all think we do great on calls, you hear certain things, we can actually like take a step back and listen to the recording of it. It gives you a different perspective. So I do recommend that. I think there's a lot of other interesting data that it provides that my team and I were looking at recently. For example, when you start to multi-thread across an account, like we know based on our data, if we are engaged with a VP and a C-level, like those deals tend to close at 4 to 5 times X the rate of if we're just engaged at the director or manager level. Things around like interactivity, talk time, like all of those are real metrics that we look at. And it's really good to put those in front of the reps when you have a rep who might be struggling in some area, or they don't ask enough questions on calls, or they go on long rambles of talking. It's like, hey, like the data shows, like, look at where you are mapped against your peers and look where you are against some of the best reps on the team. So I love utilizing that. And then second part of the question was like from a coaching perspective, we do have an enablement team, which is great. It's more of like a newer function. We don't actually have like sales trainers at our org. So a lot of that does fall on our shoulders and the manager's shoulders to make sure we're developing those cadences with the team. So just a few things that we do on our team is we do a business unit wide like strategy session. So either we'll invite someone from a different department, or we'll kind of like riff on a certain topic, or it can be like as structured or unstructured as it needs to be, sort of like whatever the appetite is or whatever we need to teach on. And then we do, pod trainings or like call reviews each week on different topics. And that will be like per manager with their team. And then one of the final things that we've introduced recently, we've had a lot of newer reps that are ramping. So it's like, what can we really double down on with like the fundamentals with the ramping reps versus like, let's, kind of not have more fun, but like do coach at a different level or like a more sophisticated level with some folks that are more tenured on the team, because we have like a pretty wide range of tenure. Yeah.
So it sounds like the split of like using peer-to-peer coaching or AI tools with how much of the coaching burden you're shouldering as an individual would depend on the tenure. Is that fair to say? Like a more tenured rep on your team is you're making smaller tweaks, smaller coaching efforts. You're using the tools at your disposal like Gong. The newer rep is getting more hands-on.
Yeah, newer rep is like more hands-on tactical, but like, to be honest, like what I learned this early on in my sales career, it's like you really want to over-index on your A players, like spend your most time with your best people. That's like something that's really fundamental to me. It's like if you can make your A player, like bring them from here, like they're going to learn faster. They're going to drive more revenue. So if you can make certain tweaks to them to get them really, really sound versus someone who might be struggling on the team, it's like, you got to pick your balances. And of course we want to help everyone, but I tend to actually over-index more on the more tenured people. Yeah.
Cool. Love it. All right. I want to change the conversation up a little bit, because so far we've talked about just a little bit of the things that are within a rep's or frontline manager's ability to control. That's not everything that's in the company's ability to control. So you could hypothetically have a rep who is using their time super efficiently, effectively personalizing, focusing at their efforts on the right accounts at the right times, the right part of the funnel with the right contacts, and still not hit their number. Or maybe they hit their number, but the team as a whole isn't, even if there are multiple reps doing that. So I wanna do a little bit of talking about like the higher level, the higher order measure of sales efficiency. So for those of you who don't know, many of you probably already know this, in the founder VC world, there's a measure of sales efficiency, which is essentially net new ARR, like the amount that your annual recurring revenue grew minus any churn, divided by your sales and marketing costs for that period. Meaning, if you made $1, how much did it cost you to make that dollar?
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen benchmark rates of like 70% is pretty good. But that has a lot to do with like, product market fit, but also how you're targeting. And this is where Heidi and Aaron, your expertise on ABX starts to come in, is because those are, yes, there are tactical differences in what a rep has to do in an ABX motion, but it's also more important to align strategically across the organization and be driven top down. Can you talk a little bit about, how does that take shape in what you see, Heidi?
So I think it starts at the very top of the funnel. So when you look at kind of air cover and brand awareness and how that drives pipeline velocity and shortens time to close. And then if you start to pull it through a little bit more and you look at content and content alignment and making sure that content marketing is delivering more effective content that helps with, objection handling, market awareness, et cetera. Then you pull it even further and you look at, well, what are the MarTech integrations? How can I derive benefit from the insights that Sixth Sense is providing the marketing team? For example, does the sales team get a Sixth Sense alert when there's high intent customers on your website so that you can strike while the iron's hot? I think all of those things go in service of driving more effective sales kind of go to market or sales activities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. I think, you said something, Colin, that really stood out to me. You talked about, this one sales rep might be doing everything right. They might hit their number, but the rest of the team doesn't. And one of the blinking red lights that we see when working with clients is when they are hitting their quota because of personal heroics versus a scalable strategy and a scalable process. It's a warning sign that the go-to-market is off somewhere, whether it's product market fit, whether it's positioning, whether it's how they, the mix of motions that they're using, whether it's ABX or something more on the demand gen side of things, partner channels, et cetera. There's something that's off there. So that's one of the first things I wanted to look at. When diving into specifically ABX, there are a few key differences that I think are critical that tie directly to the role of a salesperson in a sales team. The first thing is that in our traditional demand gen world, where you have a big sea of people, and you're just trying to whittle them down and find the people that are in market right now. In the best markets, that's going to be 1 to 3% of a market. But when if you get 1 to 3% of a huge market to be meeting with you, having demos, et cetera, that's a huge success. If you have 1% of your 100 account TAL booking demos with you, you're fired for sure. So there needs to be something else. We use a bridge that we call a high value offer. This is something we work with Gartner to help define, really what the definition around this is. But it is something that is this sort of in between conversation. It's not a sales demo. It's not a piece of content, but it is actually an actual in-person engagement. Generally speaking, we use strategic workshops and audits for this. But it gives your sales team something else to bring to the table where everybody on your TAL would find value in in this meeting, not because they're in market for buying your thing, but because you're essentially giving them free consulting to get that thing. So that's one of the tactical pieces, strategic and tactical combination that I think is really important here, in the difference between how sales teams work in a demand gen world versus an ABX world. There are some other things too around cycle times versus LTV, acquisition versus expansion, but we can dive into those if people are interested.
Yeah, I think
by the way, that high value offer, what you said, when it's a problem when one rep is winning because of heroics, that's the kind of heroics they're usually performing, right? If they're doing some free consulting to open an opportunity. Sorry for interrupting you, Heidi.
No, it's 100% right. And I also think that when you look at kind of flipping the funnel, so to speak, when you look at that ABX motion and tiering and segmenting, and you look at how sales and marketing and often kind of CX teams can work together to define those tiered account lists and what should be the one-to-one and one-to-few and one-to-many, then that automatically drives efficiency, because the entire org is wrapped around what you have all aligned on to be the accounts that you're going to find the most success with.
+1, Heidi. Totally agree. Another thing on that point too, in thinking about how you build your TAL, this is another thing, and this is probably getting a little bit outside of what today's core audience really cares the most about, so I don't want to belabor it too much, but when thinking about how you're targeting and how you're segmenting, there's a whole science and strategy to how you build your TAL. What we see a lot of companies doing when they come to us, they say, hey, we have a TAL, target account list is TAL. We have a TAL, but you look at it and it's like everybody has Disney, Microsoft, Walmart, and Amazon on there, and like not everybody's going to sell to them. So it's very aspirational. Maybe it has accounts on there that they engaged with before but didn't buy, so like, oh, we're going to put them on our target account list. There's not a lot of strategy to how they build that targeting, and if you don't have a clear strategy into who ends up on that list and how you tier them the way Heidi's talking about, between your one-to-many, one-to-few, and one-to-one, then you're going to lose all the benefit of exactly what Heidi's talking about. She's exactly right. You're going to lose a lot of that benefit of that alignment, because you're aligning on something that has a shaky foundation. So really thinking about, and that's one of the areas we can get strategic efficiency upstream from sales, is making sure that your targeting is based off of fit. And fit is defined more than just firmographic fit. It's firmographic, it's technographic, it's there's a company out there called Rev that talks about exographics. We partner with them because it's psychographics, but for B2B companies, right? So it's making sure that you have the right fit of companies on your TAL, and then you're using intent, like Kate and Heidi have both talked about, using intent to identify who are you going to accelerate into a more bottom of funnel motion, who are you going to prioritize within those segments. So all of that is necessary in order to get the full benefit of all the efficiencies that I think Heidi pointed out so clearly.
One piece of advice here when you're developing target lists is to ensure that you're involving the people that are having the deepest conversations with your clients every day in the review of that list. Like the number of times that we'll work with a company where the AEs are rejecting the leads that are coming from the SDRs. The SDRs are rejecting the leads that are coming from the research people. Research people are rejecting the target list they've been given in the first place. And the AEs are going and sourcing their own opportunities somewhere else. But then you have a stack of potentially 2 to 3 roles that are all working on a product that's being abandoned when it lands on the salesperson's desk. So your acquisition costs are being, essentially wasted in that path just because that conversation never happened. It's actually quite a common scenario, and it's not that hard to avoid. It's just a matter of finding out who's really effective in the discovery stage of the sales process, and making sure that you're involving them in the conversation, because they'll almost always know of at least a few filters that are not available through like publicly available firmographic information, et cetera. They always know some nuance that they're figuring out in the first 5 minutes of their first call with the client, that there might be a way for you to do that in mass. And so like, I just think it's really important to make sure that you're having that conversation, because if you don't, then you go with that original strategy where you didn't consult them for a year, you wonder why it's not working, you're wasting all those resources for a year, and then you have to kind of rejigger and reconfigure things way later.
Preach, Owen. You're speaking my language. It's so true. You need to speak to the people that are closest to the customer and like just run flatter organizations, like get people involved that are directly having these conversations. And, we're really big on, seek feedback, not consensus, and like don't work a project all the way to completion and then go, oh, here's what I did. Like, here's a bow on. And then everyone's like, ooh, I don't know if that's like, just seek feedback early and often and like be afraid to, go backwards, rip things up, burn things down if you have to, versus like doubling down on something. It's like, yeah, that's like we could probably talk for so long about that on a different webinar, but feedback early and often is super, super key. And you're right, like we pick up on things during these calls very early on where we're like, oh, actually, we're seeing this, type of new industry come inbound a lot. And like, we need to be able to bubble that up. So then, our marketing team might be working on something similar that like maybe we just like weren't aligned just yet, but it's like actually helping them double down maybe on a certain investment that they were thinking about and like accelerating us to, go down that path sooner and win sooner versus, that misalignment. So I love that. Speaking my language.
I wonder, one of the things I hear a lot from sales leaders, or really all revenue leaders, is that the switch to ABX, like account-based anything, requires so much change management and so much involvement from leadership and endorsement that it's hard to make it work. And then if it works, it's still hard to make it stick. But Kate, it sounds to me like your teams are doing some pretty interesting things. First of all, because they're full cycle. And second of all, because they have, it sounds like, access to some pretty cool technologies. Like, did you mention Sixth Sense?
Yeah, we use everything. We have like probably every piece of technology. So yeah, a lot of it's on intent. I'll probably defer to Heidi on like the ABX strategy, but I think it means different things to different people depending on the stage of the organization and just how they're going to market. So I think it's like really, as I'm thinking about selling to someone, it's like understanding what that motion is and like what flavor of ABX, ABM it really is. But
I think actually in a perfect world, everyone would be doing that because sales and marketing, let's face it, is radically changed over the last 2 years. Post-pandemic is a new era. And I don't even necessarily like to call it sales and marketing. Like we're all on the same growth team. We're all accountable for pipeline. And I think it is about having the right common goal and the right common KPIs. And I agree, +1 on flat or +1 on seek feedback early. And I really think it's like a growth or a joint growth, a joint revenue team with some swim lanes to keep us focused.
Yeah, the other thing, Kate, you mentioned you guys use everything, right? You guys using all kinds of tools and platforms. And I think that's something that we haven't dove a ton in on here is just the role that technology can play at an individual level. We talked about, of course, using call recording and coaching and those sorts of things. I think is awesome. But also just all the other tools, for instance, Drift is here and sponsoring this, obviously has a ton of tools that are available for making, semi-automating pieces of the salesperson's routine, being able to help prioritize who they're focusing on, being able to enable communication at scale for an individual salesperson, all kinds of things that allow one salesperson, when they are enabled properly, to be able to scale their own individual activities, and then you can scale it across the entire team. And so I think that's something that is important to think about too, especially as we start going into a season potentially of economic contraction, and how do you make your teams, smaller teams, more effective? How do you help your teams find harder to find deals? How do you expand current accounts and current customers further? Being able to enable your teams with great technology and tools is something that not just from a sales management perspective, but just from a day-to-day personal management is so key and critical here.
There's so many directions we can take this. I'm getting a couple questions in the chat that I want to address. So question from Davey is, like, qualitatively, how should we be thinking about checking in on the effectiveness of tactics used by our sales reps, like the messaging, the tone of voice, the human touch. Like, there's the things that are hard to quantify that you might not see in a dashboard necessarily. How do you decide which of those factor into whether that rep is behaving efficiently or not?
I think about it all. So I do it in it, like the team does it in a few different ways. I think, like I said, like we are very much on calls. We do a ton of team selling. So listening to Gong is big. I think it just depends on the rep, like what you have to kind of distill down if they can only change one thing, right? Because like, especially when you're coaching reps that are newer or they have a lot to work on, like there's so many things that we could do better and improve upon, but it's like, what is the one thing that if they just did this one thing and focused on this for the next 30 days, which thing would move the needle the most? So I try to have my managers really just like distill that coaching down and like make it bite-sized, hold people accountable, track it, like have them report back to you when they feel like they've executed well on it. So sometimes, it's, I know I'm talking about efficiency, but like something even more simple is just like rapport building at the beginning of a call. Like that's something simple. And that kind of goes into like tone and like messaging, whatever, but like that's one thing that some reps don't do well. I don't know if that would be like the biggest thing that's going to improve their efficiency or their close rate, but that's just like one example of something that a manager could, potentially hone in on. So I'm trying to think what else, like, yeah, messaging, tone of voice, human touch. Yeah, go ahead, Heidi.
I was just going to say, I think what's really stood out for me is because what happened in the pandemic is all out of home activities stopped. And so everything moved online. And so everything for the first time was digital. And so you had this ability to do multi-touch attribution with a proliferation of data that you never had before. And so you were able to see exactly which pieces of content worked, exactly the time between touches that worked. You were able to see all this kind of amazing kind of ecosystem of data. And that's the piece that's kind of, I think, aligned the pipes in a way between sales and marketing, because we were able to see, we had this like single source of truth, and we were able to all see, oh, like together, that's what's working. And so I think, like, to address Tripp's question, the thing that's going to keep the momentum and keep us energized is this increasing access to data.
I also think, by the way, that makes it easier for us to address Davey's question, because one of the things that's definitely true about the pandemic is that, let me show you something actually. This is some like meta research that I've been doing. I probably shouldn't be sharing it. Y'all are getting don't screenshot this. Getting a sneak peek at something I've been working on. This data is from Miller Hyman, the Alexander Group, and RepView. So it's a compilation of data that shows that B2B sales quota attainment has been falling for over a decade. So we're in the parable, the frog sitting in a pot of boiling water and it's getting hotter and hotter. We were already sitting in it for a long time. The pandemic made it a lot worse, which is why we're noticing now. But the proliferation of data, the alignment between the sales and marketing pipelines, the fact that everybody's building a more mature sales tech stack should, to your question, Davey, should help us get back to the fundamental truth that sales is a human effort, that every seller has a style that they need to develop for themselves. And that's where the art comes in. But it's hard to get to the art if you can't decide what to do and what not to do because of the science that you do need.
Yeah, and it can give you a good indicator of what reps you should be looking at to try and pull apart what's actually driving that success. I think that so Kate was mentioning there's some kind of tone, there's some general like best practices for any call that you're on. We use a framework called TACA that stands for tone, ask questions, listen, keep notes, empathize with the prospect, and repeat back what you're understanding to confirm that you understand what they're saying to you and that everybody's on the same page. I think that there's also another side to things, which is it depends based on the touch point. And what you may have some reps that are excellent at doing discovery and others that are great at negotiation, and you can learn from all of them. What we find is that the best coaching programs where you're actually encouraging your reps to get better over time are ones where you actually have a scorecard for each touch point that says what you're looking for them to do on each of those touch points. And then it doesn't seem like it's reactive or emotional when you're giving them coaching, because they already know what the expectation is. You're just pointing out where they have an opportunity against this commonly agreed upon framework for that specific call type of what you want them to be able to do really well. And one of the reasons why I think it's also important to think about this on a call type by call type basis is because while I totally agree with what Kate mentioned, that you want to focus on like micro issues so that they're able to really focus in and make improvements and don't get overwhelmed. The reality is that if you have a sales process that has 7 stages in it, and you're able to get a rep to improve their conversion rate by 10% on each of those 7 stages, you're not improving the throughput or the amount that they can sell by 10%, you're doubling it, right? Because of the principles of exponential growth, right? Each stage, like the improvement of each stage is multiplied by the improvement of the volume that came from the stage before it. So like, there's a lot of opportunities to get reps better at what they do. So don't lose sight of making sure that you have a kind of what good looks like guidance on each one of those, each one of the touch points in your sales process. And make sure that you're listening to call recordings to decide what qualitatively that really means for your organization.
That's so true. It's so true, Owen. I always tell my managers when they're sometimes getting wrapped up in the coaching, it's like there needs to be a level at each stage that like this is acceptable. Like 70% of mastery of this is really good, and like that's okay to have that. Like we don't need everyone to be flawless and like 100% perfect like every single time, because again, there's nuances. You're dealing with humans. People forget that like there's just so many things that go into like the human aspect of selling, but like you need to be able to you know, let the managers and the reps know that like there is a certain level of, you know, proficiency that's like acceptable at each stage. So you don't just like beat someone over the head with like one concept before you actually move on to some of the things that are more impactful. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Great questions, everybody. Thank you so much. Keep them coming. I have a question. What I'd love to do is give people some time back in their day. But if you have questions, bring them in. I have one more question for the panel here. I want to do it like a rapid fire for each of you. If you were going to distill down to like the next generation of sales leaders, the most important thing in your opinion, that they should know to improve their sales efficiency, given everything we've talked about today, that it depends on rep behavior, that it depends on organizational alignment, that it depends on your target list, and that the sales world has changed. I know I'm making a big ask here. What's the one sentence that you would tell the next generation of sales leaders to improve their sales efficiency?
Change everything.
Yes.
Love it. Oh man, starting super aggressive. Love that, Heidi.
Get in the details. Like the devil is in the details. Get in the weeds.
I would say, you know, I was going to say personalize, hyper personalize, but I want to get more specific and say, the more you can serve your prospects, you know, the oldest trick in the book is you can convince somebody that you can deliver value by actually delivering value. So,
Yeah.
You know, that's where that high value offer comes into play. Colin, you said that's what shows up in those personal heroics. Find a way to scale that. Make your conversations about something more than signing on the dotted line or why our product is awesome, and be more about really serving your prospects in whatever it is that they're trying to do. If we can pretend I used no punctuation there, that was just one sentence. So
it was great. Just a really cohesive, long sentence, but a good one.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Aaron.
I would say once you define what good looks like, be 100% sure that your frontline management is bought in and keeping reps accountable to following the process that will help them win.
Oh my gosh. So great. That was a great mix of like aspirational, inspirational, pragmatic, beautiful. I'll take 2 more questions from the group here. One last one from Daniel asking, what do you measure with your reps qualitatively? I think, are you saying quantitatively, Daniel? What are the key metrics for a rep aside from like quota? What are the metrics that you look at?
Maybe, does he mean actually like qualitatively, like not just
Well,
things like tone
metrics
and like
aside,
other
okay,
things like that?
sorry. Daniel's saying metrics aside, how do you look at the knowledge base? How do you know where their skills and knowledge are at?
Yeah, I think a few of the things we measure like qualitatively is like storytelling is a big one. As a sales rep, you got to be able to, you know, be able to tell these anecdotes, customer stories, and do it in a way that is not sounding like you're just like reading from a case study. And yeah, we have a whole like competency scorecard based on like what stage they're at, so like presentation skills, and then there's like so many like sub bullets of and like microcosms of what makes a really good presentation. And we have like a lot of good calls in Gong of like, hey, here's a, you know, here are 10 snippets of a really good pricing or negotiation call, like how someone framed up pricing, or like 10 really good snippets of storytelling. So like try to gather that data in your org so you can have an actual repository of like what good looks like, because a lot of salespeople, it's like we learn through osmosis and by seeing other people doing it. So I think that was something that hurt us during the pandemic, is like we're all behind our screens. I think that when I think about like quota attainment going down overall, I think some people just weren't held as like accountable, right? Like you're behind your screen, everyone's hiding behind Zoom. You don't have to like be in an office with everyone and like take calls in front of each other and have this notion of like standing and delivering. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that answered your question a little bit, but
It's a tough one. I think it's a good answer.
I think back to being a CRO and always having an excuse in my head for why I didn't have enough time to listen in on rep calls. And in retrospect, every one of those excuses were poor excuses. Like some of this stuff you'll just know. You just need to make time. Like if you're not listening to your reps, what they're saying to customers on at least a monthly basis, ideally a weekly basis, like put a task on your calendar, like get on your calendar right now, block out a couple hours and just go and do that. Because I bet that when you listen to it, you'll come out with a list of 10 or 15 things where you're like, oh, I get it. I get where a good number of our reps have an opportunity to improve. And you don't need to depend on some outside list of best practices that may not apply specifically to your sales process.
To Kate's point, devil's in the details.
yeah.
All right, gang, I'm going to do this and give you 8 minutes back in your days. Thanks to the panel, Heidi, Aaron, Owen, and Kate. You guys are all awesome. Really appreciate your time. Folks, you should connect with these people on LinkedIn and follow them. They're geniuses. Thanks to the community, too, for showing up, for being present. Great questions today. Daniel, Davey, Marcus, Jeff. I know I'm forgetting some folks. It was awesome to see you all. Hope to see you soon.